8 years ago, I bought an old abandoned cottage on the south coast of England. I was told nobody had lived there for over 50 years, so there was a lot of work that needed to be done. It was situated on a cliff next to the sea with spectacular views, and I thought I was very lucky to get it for the price I did. The local builders who helped with the renovation joked with me that I was a brave man moving into the cottage, as it was said to be haunted. I told them I didn't believe in ghosts. Then one cold, stormy night, I returned home from work, and as the car lights shone onto the cottage, I thought I saw the face of a woman staring out of the top bedroom window. I entered the cottage and ran up the stairs, calling out to see if anybody was there, but nobody answered. As the night grew darker, the storm worsened with heavy rain and thunder. I made myself dinner and sat eating it by the fire, when all of a sudden the lights went out. I guess the storm must have damaged the electricity, so I lit some candles. I sat down by the fire and resumed eating my dinner, when a bolt of lightning lit up the room, and for a split second I saw the image of a woman in a white dress standing in the corner. I stood up quickly, dropping my plate to the floor, and then grasped hold of a candle and walked cautiously closer to the corner of the room. I looked all around me through the candlelight, but could see no one. Later that night, as I lay in bed, thinking of the strange events, the rain and thunder eventually subsided, and my eyes slowly began to feel heavy with sleep, listening to the sound of the grandfather clock ticking downstairs. Then all of a sudden, the ticking stopped. I slowly opened my eyes, and there, hanging above me, was a pale ghost-like face of a woman. Her dark eyes stared into mine. Her mouth opened abnormally wide, let out a loud haunting scream that echoed throughout the cottage. For a few seconds I couldn't move, frozen with fear. Then I scrambled out of the bed and watched in disbelief as the figure returned upright and floated silently across the room, vanishing into the wall opposite my bed. I spent the rest of the night downstairs, and when daylight came, I crept up the stairs and opened the bedroom door. There was no sign of a ghostly figure, but the whole of the wall opposite my bed was covered in black mould. Days later, the builders opened up the wall, and behind it was the remains of a human skeleton, shrouded in a long white dress. When I was a child, I moved with my parents and sister into an old converted funeral parlour. It was a big place in the English countryside, surrounded by woods and fields, where I would explore and play. But when night time came, the house took on a more ominous feel. For the first few nights whilst in bed, I would hear footsteps coming from the corridor outside my bedroom door. I would tiptoe across the room and place my ear to the door and listen to the footsteps slowly fading away. On the fourth night, the footsteps again woke me from my sleep. I tiptoed over to the door and listened. But this time, curiosity got the better of me, and I quietly turned the handle and opened the door. I stepped out into the dark corridor, where I saw the figure of a tall man dressed in black, wearing a top hat. He had his back facing me, walking slowly away down the corridor, holding a walking cane. Then he suddenly stopped and began to turn round. I gasped with horror and quickly ran back into my room, slamming the door behind me. I slid under the bed to hide. I could hear the footsteps getting louder outside in the corridor. Then they stopped, and the handle on my bedroom door turned and creaked open. My heart was beating fast, and I was breathing heavily as I watched from underneath my bed 2 shiny black leather shoes walking towards me. They stopped at the edge of my bed. I shifted back as far as I could. Then the man bent down. He stared at me with dark eyes from a white, pale face. My heart was beating so fast I thought it was going to explode. Silent tears began to roll down my face. Then after a few seconds, to my relief, the man stood back up and walked silently out the room, closing the door behind him. We lived in that house for 2 more years, and most nights I would hear those haunting footsteps walking past my door. But after that night, I never opened the door to look ever again. I have suffered on and off all my life with sleep paralysis, where I wake enough to become aware of my dream, but I'm not able to move. And when this is happening, I sometimes find it hard to tell the difference between the dream and reality. A couple of years ago, me and my partner stayed in an old country manor house in the highlands of Scotland, which had been turned into a hotel. We had spent the day walking round the hills and lochs, and in the evening after dinner we retired to our room, exhausted, where we both fell into a deep sleep. During the night, I suddenly became aware of a ghostly figure of a woman in a long white dress, standing in the corner of the room. She was staring intently at me. Then she began to walk slowly towards the bed. I watched with horror, unable to move my head, as the woman drew closer. I noticed her feet were shoeless and soiled with mud. Then my heart raced as I saw the shiny blade of a knife being held in her right hand down by her side. In a panic, I tried to move my arms and legs, but couldn't. It was as if they were being held down by a heavy weight. I tried to shout and warn my partner, but only a restrained, muffled sound came from my lips. My eyes widened with fear as the ghostly figure reached the edge of the bed. She stood over me, smiling in a demonic way, then raised the knife above her head. But as she swung it down towards me, an almighty scream suddenly burst from my mouth. My movement had returned. My partner woke with a start and asked what was wrong. I had tears streaming down my face. I told him about the woman with a knife, but he told me it was just a bad dream. He got up and turned on the light to reassure me that no one else was in the room. He sat back down on the bed and held me in his arms to comfort me. But when I looked down over his shoulder, there, on the floor, leading from the corner of the room to the bed, were footprints made from mud.